Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited for today's conversation. If you're an entrepreneur looking to use speaking to build your platform in your business, or you're already a speaker and you really want to up your game, you don't want to miss this chat today. So my very special guest is Andrea Sampson from Talk Boutique. She has helped turn me into I'll call myself an amazing speaker that I am today. I won't take all the credit for that. I will give you some of that because she has really helped me to create my talks and build my speaking into something that has been very transformative. And I've really built my business through speaking over the last few years. And I'm so excited that Andrea is here with me so she can share some of her amazing insights into how you can do the same. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I am so excited to be here with you today and to have this conversation. We have these conversations a lot between just you and I, but it's nice to share it with others.
Exactly. I know we've had so many amazing conversations, and it's kind of like a peek inside our world today, which I love. So, as I said, you've helped me. We've worked together for many years on multiple different talks, really to help me craft, the whole thing, right, from start to finish, from idea to, how I actually present myself and show up when I'm speaking. And so, I would love for you to really start with why is storytelling so important? I've been talking a lot about storytelling lately. So, from your perspective, why do you see that being so important for entrepreneurs?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, we'll just start with the human side of it. We love stories. We absolutely love stories. We love stories because they help us to understand each other better. We love stories because it helps us to contextualize information. But we love stories not only because it's an emotional connection, but there actually is a real physiological connection to stories. And it's something that people don't often understand, that there's actual brain science behind it. Humans are absolutely hardwired for story. And it goes, all the way back. Think back to, when we were living in caves and hunting dinosaurs. What did we do? We put stories onto the walls of the cave so that we could connect with each other in a way that had an emotional connection, but more importantly, showed the importance of the things that we were doing. And when we think about the brain science behind it, what we've learned in most recent, in some of the more recent studies that have been done, is that our brain actually lights up. It literally lights up. Our brain is electrical, and when we hear a story, the brain absolutely lights up. And why that's important is that what we've also learned from some of the more recent studies in brain science is that memories are created all over the brain. And you see, it used to be believed that we had a memory center of the brain and that we had other centers of the brain. And while some of that is still true, we have what are called cortices. But they typically fall out into the sensory aspects of who we are as humans. So, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. These are parts of the brain that have electrical activity when stimulated. And when we're telling a story, what happens is we use language that stimulates all of those centers of the brain. And when those centers of the brain are stimulated along with information, the information is now held in each one of those cortices, not just one, not just language. And so recall, and we've all had this experience. We walk into somewhere and we smell a smell, and suddenly we are right back in our mother's kitchen or with our grandmother or whatever that smell evoked. We know this from a memory perspective, but imagine the power of now putting your brand into that context and the memory that it brings back. So how are you contextualizing your brand story in such a way that it is being held in everyone's brain, so that there are cues that bring the brand up at certain times? If you're a beauty brand, as an example, how can you use texture, as a way to bring it up? The texture of the product that would suddenly, when you feel that texture, you think of that product. How powerful would that be? If you're a food brand, smell, of course. We want to use those things. So stories help us to remember. Stories help us to contextualize, and most importantly, stories help us to connect on a human level.
Yeah, I love that so much. And if you're joining us and you've got questions for Andrea or I, please pop them into the comments or just say hello. Let us know that you're here. And I want to add to that because something that you really helped me do when we crafted my keynote is relate the chemistry and branding, right? My book is called Brand Chemistry, that chemistry and branding to the chemistry in baking. And so in my talk, I use a lot of baking analogies and I describe like the first slide in my presentation is a picture of me standing on a chair in my parents' 1970s kitchen, little pigtails, like the mixing bowl and all of that. And I talk about and I describe the smells and the, watching the cookies bubble and, rise and the smell in the kitchen and the feeling of like rolling them into ball, in my hands and stirring and measuring and giving that really visceral experience. Like they're there with me in the kitchen. And I usually joke, like, I hope everybody had a snack before because
I think
hungry. So maybe they just think about cookies when they think about me, but I've had people actually be able to tell me back the stories I've told later. Like, oh yeah, and in really great detail because they remember that analogy of the baking analogy or what kind of cupcake or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It really helps to, as you said, humanize it and create that story that connects with people. They might wonder for the first few minutes of my talk, did I come to a baking? Like, is this a food talk? Am I in the wrong room? But I very quickly kind of tie that into the branding and they get it. Really
But and that's the thing. Like I will bet when they tell those stories back, it's not just the story of Laura baking. It's the story of Laura baking and how she bakes brands. Right?
Yes.
Because that's what your story does so beautifully. And by the way, I think everybody listening right now wants a cookie.
Yeah.
Can smell it in their kitchen. I know, me too. But that's the power, right? That is the power of the stories that we create. And the other thing is too, like as you tell that story and as you're, talking about rolling the dough and watching the cookies bubble up in the oven and the smell, as I know, as I hear your story, I'm thinking of my own kitchen and of my own memories as a child with my mother baking cookies. And so we see ourselves in those stories. And that's the thing. That is the power of story because your story is my story. And it's like I always say, we all lead the same life. It's just the details that are different. And so you can tell me that story and I can have that same memory with you. And how beautiful is that?
Yeah. And I think what's really important is, and I had this conversation with some clients this morning around, they're like, oh, we've just been selling what we do. Not like, and so I'm trying to get them to think about what are the benefits, like what's in it for your clients, like what's the emotional side, right? That human side. And they're like, oh, we haven't really thought about this before. And but it really is so important to create that emotional human connection with people, whether you're speaking or on a sales call or in your website, whatever that is, it's creating that human connection with people. We're all craving that even more so now than I think we ever have before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The human side of it. And that, again, that is what stories do so beautifully.
Yeah.
And, and I think the other thing that's really important is that, like, humans, the way that we speak very metaphorically. And we don't even think about it, right? But metaphors are stories in and of themselves, and they connect us, to things that are, whether it be a metaphor or a simile, because of course, it's just a little bit of a difference in the way you use the language, but you're connecting on, unconnected things, and suddenly we just have a deeper connection and understanding to them. And so, as humans, of course, that's what we want. We want to connect.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I know you're big on thought leadership and really helping people share their message and really get clear on like what do I stand for? And I think times have been changing. There's so much happening in the world. There's so much noise, right? They're even more so than like pre-pandemic that, it was sometimes hard enough to stand out, but now everything's virtual and there's so much being put out there constantly. How do you really stand out? And I know as a thought leader, really showing up, so how do you define a thought leader and how do you help people become thought leaders in the work that you do?
So, to me, thought leadership is one of the most important things in our world today. And, I was having a conversation yesterday. I was on a podcast, and the host was asking me the same question. And he's, why is thought leadership important? And, I had to, step back and go, well, first of all, what is a thought leader? And I think we tend to think of thought leaders as um, leaders of countries or leaders of business or leaders of industry. Thought leader is one of those big unattainable things, or it has to be way out there. And I think the reality and the way that I look at it is that every person, if you've got a thought, you have the opportunity to be a thought leader. And I think we all have thoughts. And so I like to define it almost as the everyday thought leader. And the everyday thought leader is you and me. It's the person who's got a good idea in their kitchen. It's, the student who is coming up with a new way to do things. Now, that everyday thought leader has a community of people that they interact with. And though that thought leadership, whatever it is they're talking about, creates impact. And so when you take your ideas as a thought leader and you learn how to communicate, because first of all, to be a thought leader, you need to be a communicator. And I like to say a professional communicator. So, number one, to be a thought leader, you need to be a professional communicator. So, make sure that you're able to communicate that idea. The second thing that you need, and Laura, this is where you and I connect a lot on, is you need to have a personal brand. That brand, do you have a logo? Do you have all of these things? Maybe not, but you need to have a unique point of view. And that's what your brand is. When I first started doing the work that I was doing, and, one of the things that people remember about me a lot is my hair. It's always different colors. That's a part of my brand expression, and I often am wearing different glasses. These are ways in which I express my personal brand. But equally as important to that, because what is the crazy colored hair and glasses really saying? What it's saying about me is that I'm a person who takes risks, who is adventurous, who's curious. And these are the aspects of me that come through in my thought leadership. So the second piece is having a brand that's congruent with what you believe or what you value.
Yeah.
And the third piece to becoming a thought leader is having that community who follow you. Now, that community could be people you have brought into your thought leadership. You have actively brought them in and they are supporting you. Or it could be a community of people who just love you because they love what you're saying out there in the world and they have spontaneously followed you. But what you're doing with that community is you are actively cultivating them. You are actively speaking to them on a regular basis, and you're actively opening the door for more to find you. So a thought leader is a combination of being a professional communicator, having a brand that is congruent with your values, and having a community of those who want to follow you because they believe and support what it is you're saying in the world. And that's what a thought leader is. And so when I look at the everyday thought leader, you may only have a small community today. Maybe it literally is your community who are following your thought leadership. And that's fantastic. You are a thought leader in that community. That could grow over time. It could go from your local community to your city community to your country. Or maybe it never does. It doesn't actually matter. The fact is, you've got an idea that you're bringing out, and you've got a community of people who are following it, and you've got a brand that is able to support and be congruent with what you're saying.
I love that. I shared those points in the comments. So it doesn't look like it went on LinkedIn, but one of them, like, I'm on LinkedIn, get connected here. But anyway, yeah, I love those 3 points because they're so important. And great ways to build your community is to be in other people's community. And
100%.
through speaking. Right.
Yes.
And so we were chatting just before we went live that we have this perception that being a speaker means getting on a physical stage. And that is one way to do it. but there's so many more ways, right? And
Yeah.
that's a great way to build your own community. So can you share what some of those other ones are that you can see?
Yeah, of course, of course. And the reality is, like, I work with speakers all day, every day. And, I always use that term in its broadest sense, because when people hear speakers, they're like, oh, well, that's not me. I don't speak on professional stages. Well, the reality is, if you are ever in front of somebody speaking about something, you are a speaker. so, so it's a
Basically
real,
everybody.
which is basically everyone, because we all do this. And today Laura and I are on this vehicle, this platform, and we're having a conversation, but both of us in this context are speakers. We're speaking to all of you out there who are listening to us, and we're speaking to each other, and we have to do it in a way that connects with each other and with you. And so there are some things that we need to know about that. But equally as important, so the virtual world has opened up a
Mhm.
plethora of opportunities for you now to be in front of audiences. And again, I use that term pretty broadly as well, because an audience could be the person you're having a status update with on a regular basis. That's an audience. Could be the board of directors that you're standing in front of, or could be an auditorium filled with thousands of people, or could be a live cast with countless numbers of people. It doesn't actually matter, again, how many or why they're there. It's that if they're there, they're your audience. So think about the opportunities that you have in today's world. So, certainly all the social media platforms are out there, and we can all be social media stars just by creating our own little web shows. And they're really interesting. There's been some amazing ones crop up over the course of the pandemic. I mean, entire platforms, TikTok, as an example, has made a whole lot of people very famous very quickly. So if you've got thought leadership you want to start sharing, think about your own social platforms and the people who follow you on those platforms, but also look for those influencers who you can get in front of their followers as well. So that's one way. Another way would be to look at professional speaking opportunities. What, there are lots out there, whether it be those in real life opportunities, where it could be your local Toastmasters or Rotary Club. There's always places for people to speak, and especially if you've got an idea that you want to test out, look to your local events, and look at where there are speaking opportunities, and get yourself on those rosters. If you are in an industry, look to your local industries. There are always industry events, and they're always looking for people to present. So there's tons. Just do a search on speaking opportunities, and you're going to see tons and tons of opportunities. Now, most of these are unpaid. You're not going to these to become a professional speaker, but what you are doing is you're going there to do a couple of things. One, to use your voice as a tool to build your business, because your voice will be part of your business. As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you need to be comfortable with your message, and you need to be able to convey it in a way that moves and motivates others. So how are you doing that? So use those social platforms first as the way to maybe test out that voice if you're a little unsure, because your own followers are often your most accepting. And so if you stumble a little bit, they won't notice. But you can graduate to some of these other platforms. Podcasting is another fabulous way to get your voice out there. I do a lot of podcasts and absolutely love doing them. And I think one of the things that as somebody who thinks a lot and reflects a lot, that I love about podcasting is every podcast host will ask you different questions. And, the great thing about being questioned is you're often surprised at your own answers. Not that not that you didn't have that thought before, but it's just the way a question is phrased, it will bring up something new, and it helps you to develop that message, to develop that idea even more deeply. So think about all of these new opportunities that you have, whether it be podcasting, whether it be your own social media platforms, working with other influencers, or looking at the real life side of the world and going, where can I use my voice to get my business out there and to get my message out there.
Yeah. And in terms of podcasting, it doesn't mean you have to start your own podcast. It's like be a guest
No.
on other people's podcasts. I've been doing
Yeah.
that for years. People are like, when are you going to start a podcast? This is my version of a podcast,
Yeah.
right? You don't have to start your own podcast or do your own live series like this. You can, but you could start by being on other people's platforms and being their guest, which helps build it. Then more people outside of your own existing circle will know who you are.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and that's, for me, I had my own live show for a couple of years that at some point I will reprise. I've just gotten a little bit too busy to bring it back.
Yeah.
And, that was my version, to your point, of a podcast, which I love doing. But now that I've gotten so busy that I can't commit to a regular schedule of doing these kinds of interviews, which I actually do love doing, just it's timing. I get to be other people's guests,
Yeah.
and how fun is that? I mean, I love being here with you, having this conversation. I was on a podcast yesterday. I was on one last week. I mean, these are things that happen a lot, and podcasts are always looking for guests who have interesting ideas. And which brings me to a point that I think, maybe we should delve a little bit into. I don't know if you want me to go into a little bit of sort of like creating that idea.
Well, we've actually got a great question from Jennifer saying many women I work with aren't confident with what their unique point of view is. Do you have any tips to help identify them? Which I think really feeds into
Great
what you were about to say.
Yeah. And hey, Jen, I'm glad to see you here. I know, Jen. Yeah, I've got some great tips. So, here's the thing. And I think I get this question a lot of like, well, how do I even know what my idea, my unique point of view is? And so I want you to ask yourself 3 questions. So the first one is, what's your topic? And this is a what. Okay, so think of it as the topic. So what's the topic within which you work or present or think? And that topic doesn't have to be differentiated. I mean, Laura, if I look at your topic, it's branding. It's branding, and really, I would define it down to go branding for entrepreneurs. Like that's kind of your topic. That's what you speak on. There's a lot of people out there who speak on branding for entrepreneurs. It doesn't need to be differentiated, but it does need to be defined. The second piece, which is your how, and I want you to ask yourself, how are you doing something within your topic that is unique and only you can represent? This is where you get really specific, and this is where you get very differentiated, because this is where you bring your unique angle. This is where your thought leadership comes to play. So, if for you, branding for entrepreneurs is your what, but your how is by taking your unique chemistry and applying it in a way that leverages who you are into everything you do. And so that how, only you can represent that, because that is all about you. Now, that's important because now the what and the how come together to create a unique point of view. But it's not really all that differentiated for the audience, because now it's like, great, that's all about you, Laura. What about me? Right? And so you have to bring your audience into that point of view. And that's where your why comes in. Because where you meet your audience is at that why place. And the why is the impact that your what and your how will have. So when you put it together, what you've got is a complete statement. So for you, and I'm sorry, I'm paraphrasing a lot of your stuff, but because we've worked together for a lot of years, I know your stuff. For you, it's all about building your brand so that it becomes it is unique to who you are, so that you are so that your brand creates the impact that you wanted to make, and that's sort of for you. The impact is that the brand is impactful. And that's important. So now, when you're talking to your audience, the likelihood is you're not going to start with the what and the how. You're actually going to start with the why. And that's where you should, because that's where you meet your audience. And that's when you do that, you're able to then, you have sort of permission from the audience. They're like, fine, you're going to tell me about how I can make my brand have the impact that I want to make. All right, tell me how to do that. Now you've got permission to tell your how. And then the why or the what, of course, is in the background there underneath it all. But that's where you get the permission for it. So, so that's kind of the ways in which you frame out your unique thought leadership, your unique point of view. A what, your topic; a how, your unique perspective on that topic, and why only you can do it. The why, the impact you're going to create with your what and your how, and that's what the audience really wants to connect in with, and that's where all your emotions live.
Yeah, and I love that. And further to what Jennifer was asking, it's really hard to do this for yourself. Like
Oh,
we're all in our own little bubble, in our own little world, and we don't see the magic of who we are and what we do. In a call with the clients this morning, she was just saying, like, this is just kind of what, it's not that special. And I was like, no, this is actually, it doesn't seem special because you are just, this is what you do so well. But to everybody else, this would be really hard. Like, this is your magic. And we can't see that for ourselves. I often share with people that I hired somebody to help me with my branding, just like I hired you to help me with my speaking. Like,
yeah.
I need that outside perspective. I came to you with like all of these things. I'm like, what is the thing? Like, how are we going to position me as the speaker on this topic when there is so many people speaking about branding? So it's really important for me to get outside of my own head and to see my business from a different perspective and see my point of view, and to just kind of barf my ideas at you, and then you kind of like, oh, well, this one and this, and I do the same with my clients, but I didn't do that for myself.
100%.
So that's why so many people can't discover their own point of view, because to them it's just like, well, that's just who I am. They don't really realize how special that is and why that makes them so unique.
It's the the fallacy that anything that I know, everybody else must know it.
Yeah.
We all believe this, right? We've got somewhere in our psyche, we believe, well, if I know it, everybody knows it. And of course, that's not true. I mean, to your point, like, there is such uniqueness that we all bring. And, I work with people all over the world. And, I always feel so privileged to do the work that I do. I work with really, really smart people who are, leaders in their industry, and people who are, sort of doing day-to-day work that is impactful. And yet, I hear the same thing, like, from somebody who, is leading companies worldwide, and they have that same belief of like, oh, well, this is easy stuff. Everybody knows. That's like, no, that's why you are where you are, and why I am where I am. I don't know what you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, being that mirror, and it is such a reflective process, an iterative process of back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I use a coach as well. I use many coaches, but even when I'm doing talks, like I've got a talk coming up next week for International Women's Day, and I work with my own coaches. They coach me because I can't see my own stuff.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's so great. And Jill's just saying great reminders. So thanks, Jill, for sharing that perspective. Yeah, these are such great reminders. We're so in our own heads so much of the time, and really what makes us and our brand and our ability to position ourselves as a thought leader is all in here. We just can't see it, right? It's that you can't see
Yeah.
the forest for the trees, and like, because you're so in it. And having that perspective that you offer from a speaking perspective, and what I offer from a branding perspective, we all need those people in our life to help us see the magic of who we are and what we offer that's really unique and special, so that we can kind of find a way to, how do we package that up and position myself as a speaker, as in my brand, and all of those things. So amazing. Thank you for sharing all this. Such amazing stuff. I always love our conversations. So Andrea, if people want to work with you, if they want to learn about how to leverage their speaking, and how can you help them, what's the best way for them to connect with you and learn more?
So, go to our website. We have a newsletter that we put out to keep you updated on what we've got coming up. And we do have a couple of things that we're working on right now. We have a half-day webinar that we're going to be doing at the end of April that will be around moving from an expert into a thought leader and understanding the role that TED can play in that, being a TED speaker, because I am a TED trained speakers coach. So I work with a lot of TED speakers. So that's one of the things that we've got upcoming. And we're also looking at doing, if you're here in the Toronto area, a live event, probably some point in April as well, that we call a salon. And so we're just in the early stages of planning for that. So make sure to go to our website and sign up for the newsletter, because you'll get those advance notice. And also follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very active. I've always got things going on LinkedIn, so just make sure you connect in with me there.
Yeah, and I've shared the link to that to sign up in the chat. It's on the screen right now. I'll make sure to pop over to LinkedIn because it's not showing up there, but we'll correct that here momentarily. And thank you, Jill. Look at that.
Just got Jill, so great. Thank you.
Awesome. Amazing. Andrea, I feel like we could talk all day, but let's wrap it there. And I can't say enough about the work that we've done together, whether it was creating a webinar we worked on or a keynote we've worked on, a TED application that you've helped me with. Like you help me take all of these ideas and really turn them into something amazing. And speaking has been such a big part of what I do and building my business. And so for that, I thank you. And if anybody's looking at getting into speaking or upping their speaking game, definitely reach out to Andrea. She is amazing at what she does. So thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Laura. It is my absolute pleasure. And thank you for all of those kind words. You are always such a pleasure to work with. And I love watching your thought leadership grow in the world and watching your influence grow. So congratulations on what you've achieved in the last few years. So thank you again for having me.
Amazing. Thank you. So next week, my guest is Finka Jerkovic. She is the author of Sell from Love. So we're going to be talking all about selling and how to actually sell from a place of love rather than that icky place where most of us feel when it comes to selling. So that's at 1:30 next Tuesday, March 8th. I hope you will join me there. And until then, I will see you on the internet. Bye, everybody.